Welcome to this week's episode of Mind. We can't get through one of these without Cynthia laughing, but I'm going to try. Welcome to this week's episode of Marijuana Mind with yours truly, Dr. Justin Davis, a brilliant guest, which we'll get back to, Peter Sue, and my tenacious as a bobcat and newly tatted host, Cynthia Brewer.
Oh my gosh, Justin, I'm actually really impressed with you because usually you just come up with some bullshit word that you had on the calendar and then you repeat it every third episode. But yes, I am newly tatted. Yes, I did get a new piece right here and It's on the internet. And he put a video of the piece to jazz music, like he was trying to seduce my arm.
Real? Are you just saying that?
I swear on the podcast, if you look on our Instagram, I liked it. And you can go in there on the Marijuana Mind Instagram and you could see the artist put a video and he put it to some sweet jazz. Sweet jazz. That love making music. Yeah, that baby making music. Okay. And so I think he wants to have sex with my arm, but I digress. It is a great, brand new, very sensitive tattoo. And yes, I do appreciate you giving a shout out to.
And your mermaid hair. And your mermaid hair, if anyone can see you.
Oh yes, no. If you ask a hairstylist to give you mermaid hair, she's either gonna be like, "Oh, I totally know what you're talking about," or she's gonna say, "Mermaids don't exist." Like,
you know what?
good luck.
I have some patients, and their thing is dressing up as mermaids, and they actually will swim and get together and swim in various little streams, and yeah, it's true.
I know people that dress up like squirrels and bunnies, and they get with other squirrels and bunnies in parks and areas, and they just, have fun, play games.
Yeah, I must live in a really boring neighborhood. I don't know any of these people.
I don't know them either. I've just heard of the furries, and I've heard of like the guys that dress up like My Little Ponies and stuff. And I think it's phenomenal. Whatever you're into, do that.
Where do you live actually?
I'm in New York. I'm on Long Island.
Okay. Well, before, New York, lots of exciting things there, obviously, and newly recreational cannabis. But before we get into you're an interesting fellow.
We're going to get all up into you. So we'll talk. He's like,
this is what's happening in Florida.
Yes.
Florida.
Yes. But I'm excited for Peter to weigh in because he's got a lot of expertise and a lot of knowledge on the subject, that this is a great pairing. So our last episode, we had a legislative update, and we were talking about the Resurrection Rousseau bill, where he was able to get language in for additional licenses, and it passed. It passed like butter, like Tallahassee-esque activities have been happening. That is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. In the last week of session, in the last day, in the 11th hour, they put language in there that completely turned around the entire telehealth bill, which Justin was very concerned with, and just added a bunch of new licenses. And the governor has not signed it yet, but he doesn't have to. So 30 days after it landing on his desk, it will automatically go into effect unless he vetoes, but it doesn't look like that's going to be something he does. He's had a lot of very controversial bills that he's been signing in Florida. I mean, we could say controversial, we could say completely out of his mind, we could say just in line with his platform, but they are crazy and people are.
But basically as a summary, right, this bill is going to, anyone that applied for the Black farmers license and was fully qualified, which there actually are not too many candidates that were, but if they're fully qualified, they're automatically going to become licensed. There were only 7 total, and I think maybe only 3 were actually fully qualified.
So there were 12 applicants.
Okay.
So the first part of Rousseau's new language said that if you die during the application process, you get to give it to your estate, which is very specific, but we know why. So that number 12 goes down to 11 candidates after that. And if you were scored and graded, regardless of the score, just if you were judged and they took your money and you qualified, you get one. So that would be the leftover 11. But out of those 11, there were 4 that quote, did not qualify. So that brings us to the third part of Ruslan's bill, where it says, if you did not qualify, you will have 90 days to get your errors and omissions document in, which normally is around 30 days. And that's because the woman who's in charge of that documentation for the Pickford-Glickman is probably hard to get a hold of. And they know that, and they realize it. And so they're going to give extra time. It looks like.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I happen to know that one of the companies they were given some things that technically disqualified them. Simultaneously, they were scored and the money was taken. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that team.
They did give a disclaimer at the beginning of the application process for not just the Pigford litigants, but the 22 license applicants that turned in at the last week of April, that they're going to enforce no takesies backsies. So if you submit an application, you must pay $147,000. So I did some math, which, as you know, is not my strong suit. So I did some calculator instead, and I added up the OMMU is making $10.9 million off of application, based off of what I've seen and the amount of applicants, if that makes sense. So I know how many people applied for the last round that ended in April, and I know how many applied for the Black farmers, and you times that by 147,000. The OMMU should have plenty of money, plus the card money. 861,000 patients on the low end times $75 a pop. The OMMU has made over, and this is without renewals, over $100 million.
Wow.
But yet they don't have people to go and do additional inspections. They can't hire more people. Like, something's up. I'm going to call it something's up in Florida.
The other part of that bill that was tacked on at the last moment was, as you said, the telemedicine bill, meaning that formerly it was made illegal to do any kind of telemedicine, and now, except for briefly during the pandemic, now it's being brought back, and physicians will be able to do telemedicine for their existing patients that they've already seen in person for the first time. If you get someone else's patient, whether they're in your practice or they're coming from another practice, but you have not seen them, legally, you are not allowed to do telemedicine. We'll see how that goes. It's never enforced very well, but maybe it will be this time. Who knows? Because they have a lot of money.
Right. And they also did put language in there about punishments for people that exploited this language pre-bill. So that's really specific as well. And that's going to be very interesting if they do have some whistleblowers out there that are willing to turn in some of those positions that were exploiting telehealth before it was allowed.
Yeah,
probably not going to happen, but
probably not. And a lot of the physicians that were doing it are little potatoes, really, and it's the companies that run
small
them.
potatoes.
Yeah, small potatoes.
Freaking peasants.
Metaphors. But
little potatoes, baby mini potatoes.
I think that there's some physicians, here and there that had done it, that they weren't, doing it on a large scale. And the ones that were doing it on a large scale that are significant were just hired guns. It's sad that there are doctors that are hired guns, but they were actual physicians, but hired guns by companies. And they're replaceable. So the companies don't get in trouble. The physicians might get banned, but it doesn't really make an impact on the companies who are perpetrating it.
Yeah, so there could be an individual that is the the CEO and the founder of a physicians group that has no MD or DO license to himself, but he is a business person that employs physicians to do the recommendations for the program, and then pays them because they don't have to go source their own patients. They just have a constant stream of patients. So these physicians are like, oh, this is aces. I just have to keep writing and get them in, get them out, and they keep coming in. They make a lot of money. But if they mess up or the host company gets caught, the physician and their license is the one that gets punished, and then they just get replaced with another physician that wants them quick and easy.
A little flawed here, but
so flawed. Now, we do have another bill that was in Tallahassee, and that was about hemp, which also has not been signed yet by the governor, but does not need to be to go into effect. And I do feel passionately about this one because I don't want to say, but I don't want to say because I know there's a lot of people that listen to our show that are in the CBD space, and I don't want to offend them, and it's not applicable to all of them. But I think that they kind of bulldog some of our lawmakers into eliminating the caps that would have protected the consumers. Now, yes, you have to be 21 to purchase now. You cannot buy it. It can't be sexy to kids. I hate the word attractive to children. Okay. Because I don't know what kids think is sexy or attractive, or like, you know, some kids like vegetables and some kids like cookies. Like, I don't get it. So I feel like attractive to children is just, don't make it look like a candy, but it needs to be defined what kids think is cute. I just feel like we didn't hold to our guns and actually stick to some of the language that would exclude boutique cannabinoids that people don't have any experience playing with, but they wanted to because, hey, if it gets you messed up, people will buy it, and you know, why not? So.
Yes. And speaking of that, why don't we get our guest's opinion? We'll do a quick intro. So we had already mentioned your name, Peter, but Peter Sue is our guest today, live from New York. And
it's Peter Sue. You're Green Check verified, aren't you?
Oh, I am not. I am not.
You worked for Green Check, though.
I did for a little bit, yeah. Hopefully this is not a shock to you.
Well, because we had Brett on the show a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there was so Green Check merged with, they acquired a company called PayQuick. And frankly, in the merger, I was laid off.
Oh, okay. So my bad. But you
thanks
have
for
so
bringing
much
that up,
other.
Cynthia.
I know. I'm so bad. Okay, but you have so much really incredible, very valuable, highly regulated industry experience, which is very unique for the cannabis space. Either you're all cannabis all the time and that's what you know, or you did something else and you're going to dabble. But you're somebody who was like in banking. You were in the financial industry and you were doing incredibly well there. And then you decided to also play in cannabis, and it worked out incredibly well for you, right?
I did, yeah, thank you. So I was in banking for 22, 23 years or so, HSBC, Signature Bank, Dime, and East West. And at my last couple of stops, I ran cannabis banking programs. And as you pointed out, I spent the last 2 years or so with Green Check, where I was essentially kind of a consultant. So banks and credit unions all over the country that wanted to bank cannabis, I would help implement their policies, build programs, go-to-market strategies, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think one of the biggest fears with a banking or a financial institution is when, like, considering working with a cannabis company or a CBD company for that matter?
It's an interesting question. I say this a lot, and I think people, when I talk to a bank executive, I think they don't believe me when I say this because, it's like embedded in their head. And now I'm trying to convince them of something that they have believed for, years and decades, whatever. I'm like, it is all in your head. It is stigma, right? Because if you took the word cannabis out of the equation, it is a high risk banking vertical. And I have experience in that. I've done fund banking, I've done crypto banking. Quite frankly, if you took the word cannabis out of the equation, from a risk profile perspective, it's really not that different than, let's say, MSBs, money servicing businesses. So we're talking check cashers, et cetera. It's pretty similar to, say, crypto banking. You have similar concerns, BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, AML, so anti-money laundering. So at the end of the day, that is a core, or it's supposed to be a core competence of the bank. They know how to do compliance. They know how to do BSA, anti-money laundering. So if you know how to do that, if you're a bank and you know how to do that, you know how to bank cannabis.
Now, that's interesting you bring that up. So what I've seen since we've been a company, and then I used to work in a bank too, that the regulators that are coming in to do their audits on a state chartered bank versus a nationally chartered bank, the relationship is a little bit more personal, and it's, because they're right there in the branch with you. With state chartered credit unions and credit unions and state chartered banks, are they more likely to be open to the idea of banking a cannabis company?
Yes. However, So there is the practical risk, and then there's the actual, right? So there's this conceptual thing, like I mean, look, cannabis is illegal on a federal level. Marijuana is anyway, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly, yeah. So if we think about this on paper, cannabis banking should not exist,
Right.
right? Period and full stop. It is federally illegal. By definition, that is money laundering. Proceeds from a federally illegal business coming into your institution, you can't allow that. So we talk a lot about safe banking. You've heard of the Safe Banking Act, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to understand safe banking, first you have to understand something called BSA, Bank Secrecy Act. And for the sake of oversimplifying, the Bank Secrecy Act very simply says that you, the institution, you have a legal responsibility to keep illicit funds out of the financial system.
Right.
So now, again, circling back to cannabis, well, those are illegal funds. You should not be allowing them into the financial system. So how does cannabis banking happen? Well, first there was a Cole memorandum. Out of the Cole memorandum, the FinCEN 2014 guidance was born.
Mm-hmm.
And again, oversimplifying, combined, those two basically say, as long as it's state legal, we are hands off, we meaning the Fed.
Yeah.
So to your point, if I'm an executive and I'm looking at this, well, there is a situation you cannot mitigate the paper risk of federal illegality. You cannot. However, if you are of the belief that a federal agency might come in here and shut down a cannabis business because you're banking there, well, then you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do cannabis banking. But logically, if they were to do that, again, they meaning a federal agency, well, they would collapse this industry overnight, right? All over the country. Multi-billion-dollar industries in now more states than not, right? Meaning more than half of the states have some sort of a legal program. Is there really the political will to do that, to instantly collapse a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to occur in 28 medical states, 22 recreational states, right? So where I say there's a stigma is, if you think about it, that's fairly binary, right? Something either is or is not illegal. There's no such thing as it's almost illegal.
A little.
It's a
splash.
You either can cover your butt or you cannot, right? So either accept that it is a legal industry and it's okay for you to bank, or don't, just don't. Instead, what we've adopted is this current method of sort of way over policing cannabis from a banking perspective.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of what you're saying, which is most banks now, if you're a cannabis business, you're going to a bank, what do you get? You get it takes like a month and a half to get your account open. They ask you a million questions. They're asking you for 100 pieces of documents, so on.
They watch you like a hawk.
Meanwhile, what the reality is that you are probably the most heavily regulated company ever, right? Literal seat to sale tracking, right? If anything, what other industry can offer you, the bank, that kind of protection? From the seed all the way down to the product. Now, this is not to say there isn't risk, right? Because inversion, diversion, it can happen.
What about, when I was starting up my business, and it's not as severe today, but it still holds true to a certain extent. I'm a cannabis recommending physician in Florida. So it's still, medical state here. You have to go through a physician. But as a physician, I really have, my hands are not actually in cannabis itself. No cannabis
ancillary,
right?
Supporting ancillary company. Yeah.
Right. Nothing ever comes through my office. I'm simply acting as a physician for patients who then will go off and do their thing. But yet every banking institution, except for one, and I just try to stay off their radar as much as possible, continuously kept dropping my company. Every time they, whether it was Square or just various, immediately, as soon as they saw any connection, even the word cannabis, we were gone. They dropped us like a hot potato.
Yeah. I agree. And again, I think what you're bringing up there, I believe, is a perfect illustration of what I say is the psychology, right? The stigma of cannabis, because I agree with you. What you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing, right? As a doctor, if you're putting in a prescription, that prescription could be for anything, right? As long as it's legal, obviously. As long as it's legal, why is there a problem with this? And of course, this circles back to um, call it good PSA, right? For decades, we've villainized cannabis, and it's in people's heads now. On a practical level, though, let me tell you what happens. The bank or the credit union has to file something called a SAR, suspicious activity report. Most institutions will look to get out of a relationship if they have to do that. They don't want to file a SAR. And so even in your scenario, so keep in mind a SAR, suspicious activity report, we suspect some activity. So with respect to cannabis, you suspect there's marijuana related activity. Now, don't get me wrong, we actually know there's marijuana related activity.
It is like spoiler alert.
Yeah.
We're felonious
We're doing
every
this.
single day. Yeah, it's happening. We're capitalizing on an illegal industry. I get it. Like, do you get it, Justin, from the banker's perspective that you might be a supporting cannabis physician, but you're bringing money in to go send people out to go buy an illegal drug? Like to them, to like the old guys in like the upper management. This is why Bank of America, Wells Fargo, the top national banks, they're not going to dabble in cannabis. Everybody goes to a local bank. All of us go to the same local bank pretty much in Florida, and they make a lot of money off of us, as they should. But it takes a while. The trust has to be built up. And it's funny that at the beginning, the banks that really were open to cannabis were the ones that would bank convenience stores and strip clubs, the unsavory, and their kind of niche market was having to do SAR reports, and so maybe they just enjoy doing it. Maybe they found a market that was untapped and that could use banking services that needed extra attention, and they could just really bankroll it. But now it's open.
Pretty interesting. But the only bank that actually kept me was Bank of America, believe it or not. That's different than the companies that we ran the money through. That's where we were having the bigger problem was like Stripe and these companies.
If you say run the money through it, it sounds horrible.
I know that was on purpose. But
just like
but no, people come in, they pay for a medical service, and for example, Stripe would link up with our system, our billing system, and our appointment making system. And so it was really simple. But Stripe kept dropping us. Like I said, Square. I used to cavort with the founder of Square, and
what? Yeah, no, Peter and I are calling you out. Can we go back to the cavort? What means cavort?
I used to
rub elbows.
Not friends with, not as strong as friends with, just cavort. New.
I can't allow it.
I was.
That sounds intimate.
I was in San Francisco, so he started Twitter, which is based in San Francisco, and Square, which is based in San Francisco. And
you guys ran in the same circles of cavorting canoodlers.
A little bit, but he wanted to use my business in San Francisco, which was not cannabis related, as a model, to sort of advertise to other Square businesses, which never really happened because, people like that just say a lot of things and then they forget about it because they have 20 million other things going on. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I was with them for many years, knew them. Square, without a second thought, just dropped me the second they saw that there was another business in Florida that had cannabis, even in the name.
Yeah, that's why you go by an acronym now. You have to hide it.
That actually is everybody. That is why.
Yeah,
that's why Florida marijuana doctors became FMD Green.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so I want to make. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I agree with you there. There is the institutional psyche that is required of the bank or credit union to say we're okay with banking cannabis. We're okay with banking adult entertainment. So here's an example. Pawn shops, right? I don't know if you know this. Mm-hmm. Perfectly legal. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those kind of businesses, but most banks will not bank. Most banks will not bank pawn shops, right? And so now, why is that? Well, there's some concerns about reputation over this. There's some concerns about unsavory business practices.
Mhm.
So yes, you tend to see a certain parallel, the type of institution that would consider cannabis banking. And so when I was a consultant, like that's you would tend to ask that question up front. Do you do any other kind of high risk verticals? And almost always the answer is yeah. We also bank this, we also bank that. So and I think that tends to be written into certain policies is actually identified, right? Like what do you do when there's a SAR? And if you're the type of institution whose reaction is, no, we would get out of that relationship, well, then that's not the institution that banks cannabis.
Yeah. And it looks like, well, and I could be wrong, some banks that maybe had some adverse interactions with the regulators don't want to rehash or have them come back, like their once a year visit turns into once every couple of months because they got caught doing something unsavory.
Yeah,
Under the radar, that extra attention that they had, they don't want to get more attention, so they're just like, let's not mess with it, let's not just wash our hands of it. And how much money can we really make off of them anyways? It's
right.
just going to be extra attention. But I think we're incredibly blessed that we found a bank in Florida and our clients were able to utilize the same bank, and it's worked out phenomenally. And we were kicked out of a few, and that was kind of sucky for a little bit. But now it doesn't seem like there's going to be someone busting through the door of cannabis
No,
companies. I want to know what your personal feelings are on if the banking industry has to dabble in banking for psychedelics. Do you think that's going to be more acceptable for them because it's going to be a researched activity? It wasn't as much prohibited and kind of assigned to a group of minorities and disenfranchised people. It didn't have the same history. Do you
yeah,
think it's going to be treated like cannabis psychedelics or differently?
that's a good question. I actually did bank. So when you bank cannabis, people assume you'll do anything.
Oh yeah,
so
we know you're crazy. You got to be crazy.
so I actually had that exact scenario, and I'll be honest with you, I was of the impression that the bank would be like, Peter, one thing at a time, whatever.
Yeah.
But what you brought up, that exact scenario played out, and that was exactly the response. They said, "Oh, well, we have physician administered, psychiatrist administered. In this case, they were talking about ketamine and stuff like that. And the bank was absolutely okay with it, and I was a little surprised, to be honest with you. But that was a key driver, the fact that they were medical professionals. These are prescription based, tracked, et cetera, et cetera.
So is cannabis. That's what's so funny to me, because we're in a medical only market. We have a licensed physician right here with us who
Yeah,
carries an MD license that is active in
yeah,
multiple markets.
yeah,
He has no marks on his license. He's a good, standing member of the community, and he also recommends for cannabis.
yeah.
Now, okay, you feel good, Justin? Did I do enough? Enough? Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So Justin's a doctor and practice and in the cannabis space, considered a recommending physician. It's the samesies. Okay,
Yeah.
but I feel like because psychedelics were not tied to a big prohibition movement, and they were kind of created by a bunch of old white guys and then prohibited because of the abuse of it. But that's the
Yeah,
truth. MDMA and psilocybin, LSD, some of the ones that are starting to be kind of cultivated to help with mental health issues, and they
yeah,
want to learn more about it. They never did that with pot.
yeah,
Mhm.
They
yeah,
didn't even want to learn about it.
Yeah. Now
But
it's interesting. Now there's starting to be a lot more research with marijuana. Um, but it's still difficult. But I was just at actually this last week, I spoke at a conference, the CCORC, the Clinical
Cork,
right, right. It's like I'm
did
always trying to
you
remember
spoke
what it
at
stands
Cork?
for.
That's amazing.
But basically, uh, it's all everyone there was presenting, except for myself. I was presenting as a physician, but everyone else presenting as researchers in cannabis. And pretty interesting. There were a lot of students doing research, people using some
I
was,
research all the time.
Some was
all the time.
analyses, so like retrospective analyses, like looking at Kaiser Permanente from Northern California did a huge thing looking at the attitudes and outcomes of pregnant women. And then you had all kinds of students doing like models with rats and just looking at like learning ability with cannabis, without cannabis. This is a broad range. There was even one woman looking at the effects on other women who have difficulty with orgasm using cannabis to help solve the problem of orgasming. And in fact, she's going to be on our podcast coming up. So get ready for that.
That's crazy. That's going to be an interesting podcast because I have a medium amount of questions, but I'm not going to ask a single one.
Yes, you are. You're not going to be able to help yourself.
No,
You'll just be like, I'm asking this for a friend. It's just
for
a
a friend. This is
Right.
this is a viewer. A viewer wrote into us and said, "Okay, so what do you know?" I'm just kidding. It's actually pretty interesting, though. I'm glad they're giving it the time of day, but at the same time, like they've done a lot to really like make this industry have to work for it. Like you earn your paycheck in cannabis. Now we have no idea compared to the people that started way back when they actually had to worry about where are we going to put all this cash every day? Are we going to get raided by the cops? Are we going to be arrested for doing what we're doing? Those people are the OGs. Those are people are the bravest part of our industry. We have it made. We don't have to worry about that shit. But it is
We have
still
publicly traded
stigmatized.
companies now.
We do. I know. I wonder, is there a publicly traded psychedelics company yet?
No, not as yet. Not that I'm aware of, anyway.
Let's
Sounds like
let's
there's
table
room
that for
for-
now. I feel
Yeah.
like there's something. Yes, we're gonna get into business now. I want to hit on the fact that you served in the military. Thank you for our service, for your service. Thank you for us for your service. It's really important. I think we've had like a nice couple of weeks of veterans on the show right before Memorial Day too. So we appreciate you going and volunteering to protect all of us here. And you also are the board member and treasurer of the Asian Cannabis Roundtable. But most interesting to me was that you are the member of the Rolling Stones Cultural Council, where you actually contribute a lot of very relevant content about the cannabis space to Rolling Stones magazine. That's so cool.
I do. Thank you. Yeah. I'm all those things.
That's a big deal.
I also sing, as you pointed out.
Okay,
No,
so before the listeners get too confused,
I'm just kidding.
before the show, I asked him if he was a singer. But before that, earlier today, I was doing my research and I was, I always don't just take what Ty gives us because that's easy. Justin's going to, be able to pull that. I want to find the dirt. So I Google you. Well, there's a Peter Sue that has a YouTube account and he sings very emotionally driven songs. He's got an emo haircut where it's like in his eyes like this. And then he's got like a scruffy beard and he just talks about like, and his angst and stuff. That I thought it could be you, but it turns out definitely not you. But you do sing. You just don't have a YouTube channel about it. Now we're not going to ask you to do that, but that is showcases all of your talents. You're not a one-trick pony. Tell us about working with Rolling Stone magazine as their culture on the Culture Council. Did I say that right?
Yeah. It's not a big deal. You get to contribute articles, and provided they like it, I guess. So I of course mostly write about the business side. I talk about the banking, the financing, things I've seen that work, things that didn't work. I did write an article. Actually, this is pertinent to what we're discussing. I recently wrote an article. And it got the most reaction I've ever gotten since I started writing. So it makes me feel like, maybe I shouldn't talk about the business side because nobody cares about that. I compared cannabis industry to the music industry.
I saw that.
Yeah. And so I make a very basic point, which is, there's all these people saying like, oh, the cannabis industry is like CPG or it's like real estate or, of course, if you look around, you see a lot of finance-related executives that are in cannabis. And that, of course, logically is due to the very tough capital nature in cannabis. But I'm going to make the argument that if you think about what the most comparable industry cannabis is, I think it's music, because music is so culturally driven, and there's all these like, subcultures and
Yep.
subgroups, um now this is not to like promote the brand in any way, but I just simply I make the comparison to like cookies. So if you look at cookies, I mean, Burner operates that like a music label, right? They're marketing like music. What they have these like deals where they sign local cultivators, which, I mean, that sounds just like a record deal or a collab, if you want to call it that, right? Um, so all of this to say that I feel like if you're one of these executives and you're looking, who should I recruit? Where should I recruit from? I think you should look at music.
Yeah.
And so I guess to my surprise, I mean, in my mind, it made sense, but to my surprise, that's the one that like people, like random people were reaching out to me like, oh, I read your article, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, 20 years of banking, all I had to do was write about music.
Did
Well,
people
I've
agree
never
with
heard
you
it before.
on, yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point.
what were people responding positively, or did they take issue?
No, definitely positively. They were saying like, oh, I never thought about that. Or that they agreed. Of course, the people that agreed tend to be people that came from music. So
Yeah. I would never have drawn the two lines there,
yeah.
but that was one of the, I mean, it was a title that like when it says, comparing cannabis and music right there in the title, that's clickbait, because you're like, what is this pothead talking about? Some stoners like, yeah, man, it's like
It's
super
just like
groovy. No,
music, man.
this was actually, yeah, exactly. So that's what you think. But if they see you and your profile and your history, there, and they give it a chance, they'll see that there's actually a lot of interesting comparisons. You also did a very, very interesting to me article about Delta 8 and CBD. And I want to make sure we touch on a spot that I thought was incredibly insightful and very, very, it needed to be said for sure. But you were talking about industrial hemp versus the oversaturated CBD market, which is, Justin and I have hit on this more times than we would like to. I have my opinions about Delta 8, Justin has his, and boutique cannabinoids, but mostly we can go back to just CBD world and say everybody picked CBD, and very little, nobody picked it at the beginning in Florida for industrial hemp. How do we make people excited about growing for industrial hemp and fiber when CBD is so insatiably lucrative?
I am shocked that it just has not been more of a thing, honestly. When I think about all these like various applications that it has, and look, maybe we don't have super strong data, that this is part of the problem, right? Like if someone could, I know now they're starting to build houses, right? In Pennsylvania, there's a project where, they're actually building out actual houses out of hempcrete. Now we're going to get some of those backups, right? Because you've heard all these statements before. People say, hemp is a better insulate. It won't, it doesn't degrade as well as much. It's easier to grow, obviously. I mean, any type of statistic, people have thrown it out there. If you listen to industry insiders, hemp is the answer to life's questions, right? Every one of life's questions. The problem is, how do you back that up with studies? So to me, maybe that's the issue. And of course, you have a lot of embedded industries, and unfortunately, that means lobbying dollars.
Peter, don't you think it just ultimately comes down to show me the money? So you have farmers and people working with hemp in one capacity or another, and they're looking for a cash crop. So they feel like they can make more money in industrial hemp, they would be doing that. And right now they feel like they can make more money in CBD. And so
they can. They're right.
Yeah. So why would you want to be involved in an industry as a farmer where you know that you could make more money by simply using a different seed?
Agreed. And this is kind of hopefully I'm making the point that I think if we could come up with the data, if people can show the data. Now here's the reality, though, right? Maybe it's not there, because look, I can't tell you that hemp truly will build a better house, truly will make better concrete. But if it does, to your point, if the money is there, of course people will do it, right? CBD, let's be honest, people aren't really making money doing CBD. Not like they used to. Everybody rushed into a CBD world and then found a very different market waiting for them. I think if we can show that it truly is better as a textile, truly is better as building material. And again, I don't know that to be a fact. I'm being told that by industry insiders. But hey, we need to see some of those studies because, of course, two people will do that, right? It apparently is even good for the soil and stuff like that, right?
It does. It cleans the water.
Right.
It's a
And
renewable
ecologically,
resource
right?
that
If you're
Go ahead,
if
Justin.
you ecologically, you can grow a crop in a single season, maybe even more than a crop, versus how long does it take to grow a tree? And then you have the destruction of all these trees that take a long time to grow. So sure, it makes a lot of sense. Probably a lot of it comes down to the infrastructure though, right? Because if the infrastructure is already fine-tuned for using other modalities than hemp, then you have to fight. You're going to need that infrastructure to change as well, or you're going to have everyone fighting tooth and nail, just like with energy, right? Everyone knows that, using coal and fossil fuels is not the best thing for the world, but you have so many people that are heavily invested in that, whether it's the automobile industry or Saudi Arabia or the coal miners, that nobody wants to change from fossil fuels.
Yeah. No, I agree. Again, it's about the money, right? Like if we could show, I don't know if you read this study, Chernobyl, when post meltdown, they planted hemp there, cannabis there, right, in order to mitigate to remediate the soil.
Did it work?
And we'll see, right? But here's the question for you: would you smoke that shit? Would you?
Well, here's the thing. The reason nobody grew fiber in Florida is because we didn't have a way of processing it. It's not because they didn't want to. Some people wanted to grow for fiber because they had acres and acres, which requires, fiber requires a lot more land. And then you need to have a way of processing it into something, So the decorticator that they need to process it is incredibly expensive. We just now in the state of Florida got one that apparently someone is donating as tribute or something, making it available to use for the two people that are now growing for fiber. And they are able to now have this, end result. But if it helps us get off the dependence of foreign assistance and fossil fuels and all that stuff, you're really going to have to convince a bunch of people that car running on hemp is better than the car with gas. And there has been, unfortunately, a lot of accidents with hempcrete. And so I feel like there needs to be a little bit more sustainable practices on how to make something stronger if you're going to replace something that we know is strong because it's been around forever. You have to really drive that point home for safety, efficiency, effectiveness, and saving money. I just don't think that you can ask that of just a handful of farmers in the country to be
probably going to take
a
visionary entrepreneur like an Elon Musk type, right, to come in and start doing something that's going to change the industry, and then everyone's going to follow. As soon as they see that it's successful. Now, how many electric car companies do we have? Right?
If Elon Musk could make a rocket out of hemp, because I mean, I watch him go up every single day, just some twice a day. Okay. Like sometimes they come back down too, not on purpose. They'll go up and then just so if he's got that long rocket money, then why can't he just make one out of hemp? He smokes a lot of weed. Makes sense, right?
So fundamentally, I agree with Justin, right? Like the issue is, again, it comes down to money, right? Like right now, there is no way, even if you decided, okay, I can make a business out of this. I'm going to plant a few acres, create textile, right? By the time you turn that over to cordage and stuff like that, like there is no way for you to make hemp clothing cheap at scale right now to compete with cotton. They're just simply not true, So the reality is, even if you wanted to, even if you thought, okay, this makes sense, you simply cannot compete with the other embedded industries because of the infrastructure. If you went out there and you wanted to find a vendor, you have far less options right? So everything is just going to be more expensive. And then, of course, you don't actually know. We don't have the data to show that it truly is better.
My dad bought a pair of shorts that were made of hemp, and he bragged about being able to smoke them for like 2 months. And that was a big deal. I use a grinder made of hemp, and
Yeah.
it works just as well as a metal one. And I feel better about myself because it's made of hemp, but a metal one would actually really be a lot more efficient. You know, I don't know. What do you have made of hemp, Justin? I mean, we're in the industry. How much are we actually, as industry professionals, supporting the industrial side? I have a grinder and my dad has shorts. What do you have?
I have a hat, a few canvas bags. I don't know
Did
what
you
else.
buy it because it was made of hemp, or did you buy it and then find out it was made of hemp?
I think they were given to me because they were made of hemp.
I
People
thought
thought it
so.
was cute. You know what I
Yeah.
like?
I don't have
Kind
one,
of
but
way off the subject, but it just made me think of it is I love products like sheets that are made out of bamboo and
Oh my
shirt,
gosh, I'm totally with you. So soft. It's like
so
sleeping on
soft.
a bunch of baby skin, but so like sourced reasonably and ethically. Ethically sourced baby skin, like sheets. Yeah, that's what bamboo. But that's not hemp, sweetie. Hemp is going to be for the not for the finer things. It's going to be for the rougher around the edges
Only
people.
we could also smoke bamboo, we'd have it made.
well, actually,
Yeah.
speaking of bamboo, if you think about it, bamboo has a lot of the same characteristics, right? Grows fast, versatile, etc.
Are you a
You would
bamboo
think.
smoker?
I'm sorry.
Are you a bamboo smoker?
No.
Just tell me. Okay.
My point though is that it has a lot of those same characteristics, right? It's a much more sustainable crop, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera. Yet stuff made out of bamboo at the moment is not cheaper.
No, not at
Yeah.
all. Because the luxury of those sheets and those towels, plus
Yeah.
cannabis and bamboo are both considered invasive species.
Yeah.
They can get out of control. Cannabis is considered one after,
Yeah.
the Florida, research on it. It is an invasive species.
Yeah.
So is bamboo. But damn, those sheets are soft. So
Like
I don't
baby
know.
skin stuff. Yeah.
I'm going to get you a set, and then you're just going to put them in your bed, and then you're going to thank me later. But Justin's right. They are incredibly soft. I don't know how they get from one to another. How do they make the stalk of a bamboo into such a far away product that you would never consider? Maybe hemp just hasn't had its day in the sun yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys are like, yep. Okay. Well,
Yeah, Peter, you're gonna say, cut your tongue. No, but Peter, besides what we talked about, your resume says that you've started and nurtured over 100 different hemp related companies. That's quite a lot.
Banking programs.
Okay, banking programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, that's
And-
still a lot, though.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah, so these are banks or credit unions that want to bank cannabis, and that of course includes the hemp side of the business. So yeah, I mean, it's something I'm proud of. So FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, FinCEN estimates that there's some 700-ish FIs, financial institutions banking cannabis. Most insiders agree that that number is way too high. We think it's closer to like maybe 250 or so. And yes, I worked with around 100 of them. So anecdotally, I figured I've worked with roughly half of the industry.
That's a big deal. That's actually, so did you come on as a consultant from a private bank, like sourced your services as a consultant to come and implement and execute a program that would also cover their ass with the regulators and then reduce the risk?
Yeah. So again, my role was more to be that banker that has already done what you're looking to do now, right? So all of the above, whether it's the policy, whether it's the risk mitigation, considerations for the board, in some cases pitched to the board. So, you have a bank or credit union that's like, we want to do it, but our board's against it. And I go in there and try to convince them. Doesn't always work, but with that's the attempt, right?
Like the fixer.
And then of course, in some
Peter.
cases, it's literally like, now we have to sell, we have to get some business. How do we do that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you even go out and source the clientele that would be banking like you go source the accounts?
I've done that. Usually it's more like, all right, do you need me to train your salespeople, join your sales call,
Okay.
something like that. So if you're bringing in the prospect, yeah, then I help you close a deal. You know.
I was about to say, your retainer better be out the freaking window if you're going out and getting those $1 million licenses to print money, bringing them to their institution.
I have
Don't
done
do
that from
that.
time to time.
Not without a fee. I'm going to be your manager, okay? And I'm going to go and make sure if they're going to use your services, they're going to pay for that long cannabis money, because that account is invaluable. That account is going to be a very high balance consistently and growing, and have ancillary. I mean, that is a big deal for these institutions. They need to see how valuable that relationship is.
So sometimes what happens is, Florida being one of these markets, right? You get one or two institutions that get heavily entrenched, and everybody goes there, right? And so when you get a new institution, believe it or not, some banks, despite all this talk about like, cannabis businesses can't find banking, on the front line, it's actually pretty competitive now. It's hard to get accounts. It's hard to have a successful program. And again, in a place like Florida is a great example where, again, there's one or two. And what I'm asked to do is go in there and help them. How do we take an account away from X, Y, and Z bank?
That's also in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. And so the question is, hey, especially with the new program, right? Like, you're against somebody who has been doing this for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They speak the language. They know the players. They understand the regulations. And we talked about this already. Cannabis can be very community driven. They want you. They want to feel like you're part of the community, and that's hard to do when you're a new program. And have you invested that money? Are you willing to invest that money, the time? So that's a lot of where I come in. Like, okay, well, you could do this, but I can hack the process by a few years for you.
That's really interesting, because you're right. Florida is loyal to all of us bank with the same place, pretty much. And that's because we all got kicked out of the same bank at the same time. When Florida, First Green Bank was here, we all had to go pick up our checks. And of course, we talked about, my business partners wanting it in cash just to be, a nightmare for them. And then we're like, wait, we don't know how much that's going to look like in actual practice. Maybe go back to the check and try not to. We were angry. We were all angry, but we all, went to the same place. And I'm going to say, you're welcome to some of the suggestions I made, but from my history. But at the same time, if you're working with a bank in Florida, you are incredibly loyal, because unless they do something that's going to exploit you, there's all these accounts there and they treat you just fine. And you only need a few things from them, because you can't get a lot of things from them. But poaching a client from that institution that has been there with us for 6 years or so is incredibly difficult, because although in the lab space, they can hop between laboratories as they see fit, when it comes to the banking space, they cannot afford to lose merchant processing and depositing and all that. That is incredibly detrimental. So I know how hard that job for you has got to be, to get them to train, to poach people away. Now, the new licenses coming on board, those should be pretty easy to acquire, if they came up with a nice advertising campaign. But that's what you have to do, is you have to tell everyone you're canna friendly. Maybe share, like sit in a joint circle, like a drum circle, and pass a joint with them, like board member to president, and they will accept you as one of their own, possibly.
From a business development perspective, I think there's just key in understanding, like, this idea that like a cannabis business can't get an account. That's a little bit of a myth. They can get accounts. What's really deficient is capability, capacity, and costs. So key number one is building a program where you are able to address those 3 C's, right, somehow. But by the way, this is normal banking, right? Someone's banking somewhere already and you want to take that account away. You want to displace an existing relationship. That's hard to do. You got to do better. So how do you do better, right? Luckily in cannabis, that the bar is not super high. Like to your point, the people that are banking now, probably very few of them are like super happy. They're just there because
convenience,
inertia, right? Convenience, and the fear. If I leave my existing bank and I go to you're a new program. How do I know you won't get out? And that now I can't go back, And then of course it is disruptive. So
Yeah.
unless you're willing to do more, and by that I mean, provide credit.
That's an interesting point that you say
Yeah.
that. Now, this is something I want to get your opinion on before we close out the show, because this is incredibly important. I was at a dispensary recently in Gainesville, and they are offering credit cards.
Yeah.
I thought, are you kidding? Is this a joke? And they were
Yeah.
like, no. And they showed it to me, and it's awesome. It's got some weight to her. She's a heavier card, like a black card from like American Express. And
Wow.
it's a cannabis credit card. Now, I didn't get into it because I knew I was going to end up getting one if I like listened to the spiel or the shtick. But because it's so tempting to get that card. But it was specific to their dispensary, and it was a credit card. I know how dangerous that is for me personally, because that's not real money to me. I'll just be charging all day, and I'll buy your stuff.
In other places?
I'll get one in Justin's name. What was that?
Can you use it wherever you want, or can you?
No,
only
it's
use
not
it?
a MasterCard or a Visa. It's for just the dispensary.
So it's kind of like a fake credit card.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like, that's why I would consider it a fake card, and I would overuse it, like as if I didn't have to pay that money back. Is this a thing that you've seen in other markets? Is this something that actually has a lot of value to it to customers, or is this just one of those things that's going to get me in more trouble when I go back?
Well, so it sounds like you already knew this, which is that the major networks won't allow, so MasterCard, Visa, American Express, they do not allow for cannabis-related transactions.
For good reason, because potheads will charge everything. We will.
In fact, there is no compliant way to ring up a cannabis transaction. There's literally no way. There's something called an MCC, a merchant credit code, right? Which is how transactions are labeled, right? So you might remember a few years ago in the Ease case. Ease is the delivery cannabis delivery company in California, and they were ringing up cannabis transactions on credit cards, but they were miscoding it, right? So you get $100 worth of merchandise, your credit card bill, your receipt comes, and you see an MCC for like scuba equipment,
That's fine. I'm cool with all that.
And I'm using that as an example because that's literally, this is all public information because they got sued. The CEO went to jail, and that was in fact one of the examples they gave was scuba equipment. So one, there is no major credit cards in cannabis. If you don't get me wrong, you'll see them, here and there. You'll walk into the dispensary, they take credit cards. They work to varying degrees. They're not compliant. So something is going on, right? Like so there's some method being used to obfuscate that transaction to get it through the system. And they work, they'll eventually get shut down maybe. It's a question of, do you get caught kind of, then there's what you're talking about, a store credit card. So a merchant provided credit card. That you certainly can do that, right? Like if I have a big enough of a business and I'm willing to provide terms, I can obviously give this is like a store credit card. Now,
are they allowed to run my credit though?
Well, so that's the question. How are they doing that, right? Like how are they doing credit cards? Who's the sponsoring bank? How are they clearing that transaction? There's a lot of mechanisms involved there that makes it sound like it's probably not on the up and up. Because in order to do that, it's an up and
up company, but it does sound kind of weird. Like, how do you determine how much credit I get?
Yeah.
And then like what are like what's my my interest rate? And then like, are you gonna bill me and tell me that I owe the minimum payment? I mean, I have so many questions, but I couldn't ask them because I didn't want them to think I was down because stuff looked too good, but it also looked very gimmicky and also looked like a great marketing tactic because the card had weight to it, darling. It was a heavy card.
Was it
like
metal?
A black card.
Was it metal?
Yes.
Wait,
Justin, let's go get them. Let's just go get them. Come on. Like we'll use your credit score, it's fine.
Probably more likely a store, a pre-store credit card. So think of like Starbucks, right?
Yes, I love Starbucks. Perfect.
So how you load money into like a Starbucks account, right? Into an app or whatever. And then from that app, you can buy anything you want in a Starbucks store. And which is not just coffee now, right? They got merchandise, they got everything.
White chocolate mocha all day.
Yeah. But they sell mugs, they sell
Mhm.
cookies, Um, so that is closer to what a lot of these merchants are doing. Now the question is, can you swipe? So Starbucks, you can link that to your credit card,
Mhm.
right? In theory, you could do the same thing. You link it to if Peter Sue owns a dispensary, could I create an app that allows you to link your credit card to that app? So
Mhm.
you're not buying cannabis. You are buying $25 worth of a preloaded store
Points.
card.
Yeah,
Right.
Campay
Yeah,
does that.
Campay does that. Yeah, as an example. Yeah.
What,
So in theory, those are compliant. But if you're letting the credit card company know, so here's the key, right? If you call MasterCard and you say, "Hey, here's my idea. I'm going to create like a Starbucks account," you know. So no one, you're not buying cannabis. You're buying store credit.
Yeah.
Okay, but what's the store? Oh, it's a cannabis store. They will
It's
not say that it's okay.
No, I think I'm gonna get some more propaganda about it and some more
Yeah.
of their leaflets, and then I'm gonna run out of there before they bait me into it. I think it might be you load it and get a discount if you use it. That's the only
Yeah.
thing I can see working. You put your own money in, you can use your own money, and because you have this card, and they, like maybe you get more discounts. I don't know, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
find out for her, and I'm gonna let you know because I know
you
you will
find that
be.
out. What
All
what
right.
I'm really seeing, the trend that I'm seeing is where they accept debit cards, but
Yeah.
they have to round it up and overcharge you, and then they give you cash back.
I don't like that. I hate it when they explain that to me. They're like, we're going to charge you 40, but we're going to give you $5 back because we're using, no, this is not a legitimate transaction. I'll just can pay, just scan this fake thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm just
Justin,
like,
that's a little different. That's probably have you heard of these like cashless ATMs? You familiar with those?
Yeah.
So that's closer to that. The problem with those is that Visa has come out and said, we don't consider those compliant. You got to stop using.
Wow. I
Yeah.
wonder when they're going to come to Florida. I mean, at the beginning, it was like cash only. Here's an ATM. Have fun.
Yeah.
Then CanPay came along, and that seems to be like the norm. But then some people didn't want CanPay anymore, and they were
Yeah.
able to take debit cards for this weird, like barteristic transaction with like IOUs and like all these other things. But
it works well. That's what I would do every time if I were
you do
Yeah.
that?
if I were going to do it. That's what I would be doing. Yes, and I would be like, give me the $5 back. That's fine, except for they know
No.
that you're going to give half of that to tip anyways.
No, see, I'm not going to get God. I'm going to use my CanPay and you can scan it. And then I get a free spin because now they're incentivizing me by getting me free spins for using the CanPay app. So I'm being incentivized on so many different levels to just use fake money that's not coming out of my pocket into someone's hand. It comes out a couple days later and surprises me. So of course, this is all responsible adult shit for sure.
Of course,
Buying
obviously.
drugs, buying lots of drugs with different types of pain, legit as it gets. But we flew past our hour, and you are just a wealth of knowledge, and I really love the background, the history that you've got in the financial
Thank
space,
you.
because the cannabis industry always has like so many questions about banking. We don't know who to go to. We don't know who we can trust. And it's nice that you don't have any like true like affiliations with any of the big ones. You're just here to inform and help us. And so I'm going to keep an eye on that. Rolling Stones. I like all of the articles you've written so far. So
Great. Thank you.
they've all been incredibly interesting. I've learned something in every single one. So you're very talented, and I'm glad you came on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to sign off?
Keeping it lean, keeping it green, as always, Dr. JPDs.
Ooh, are you doing finger pistols at our guests? Okay, for those who can't see
No,
it.
that was at you. That was at you.
Yeah, no, that was impressive. Yeah. Could you go pew, pew, next time?
That's your little sound deter, like pew, 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 right?
Pew, pew. Yeah, like that's what a gun sounds like, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Next time I do want to touch on this so I don't forget. We need to talk about constitutional carry and how that applies towards cannabis use. But because I'm going to forget, next episode, don't forget to remind me. So it's going to be riveting.
Yeah,
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, Peter, now we can, anyone can carry a concealed weapon in Florida. No special license needed. But you're a military man, so
Army.
Actually, yeah. Do you have an opinion on that? Constitutional carry, no permit, and cannabis use?
I mean, I certainly think that cannabis use should not affect your gun rights.
Right.
That said, I hesitate to support like just anyone can carry a gun. To be honest,
We all do. We all
Concealed.
kind of hesitate.
Concealed as well, right? Not just
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just carry a gun without a permit and a check.
Yeah.
That is a little kind of.
I think
odd.
like like you can't get a drive. You can't just jump in a car and drive. You have to prove that you know how to operate a vehicle safely. But you can get a gun and not have to prove that you can operate that safely. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, because it's in the Constitution, and so America hashtag.
America.
you just do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it's what's
I'm
Florida.
qualified. I'm
There's.
qualified.
I wish that was the most controversial bill that was passed this season. It wasn't. It was
No.
so mild. It was so mild compared to so much other stuff, but we won't get into that. You were a delight. You're welcome back anytime. This is Cynthia Brewer signing off for the Marijuana Mind. We will talk to you next week.